Harari, humanity's most important 4 years have already begun. Have you ever had the experience of recognizing in retrospect that you were living through something genuinely important while it was happening, and that you had not fully registered its importance at the time, that the specific period, looking back, was clearly the period in which the decisions were being made and the trajectories were being set, and the foundations were being laid for everything that came after, and that you were navigating it with the specific quality of ordinary daily attention that the ordinary demands of ordinary daily life reliably produce, rather than with the specific quality of heightened awareness and deliberate engagement that the actual significance of the period would have warranted if you had understood it clearly while you were inside it? Most people have had this experience in the context of their personal lives. The relationship that was forming or dissolving, the professional opportunity that was opening or closing, the health condition that was developing in the background of a life that was too busy to notice it until the development had become a crisis. The specific window, always visible in retrospect and almost always invisible at the time, during which genuine attention and genuine deliberate engagement would have made the crucial difference between a trajectory that went one way and a trajectory that went another. What I want to say to you, with the full seriousness that the claim demands and the full precision that honesty requires, is that this experience, this retrospective recognition of having lived through something important while being insufficiently aware of its importance, is the experience that the majority of human beings currently alive on this planet are going to have when they look back at the period between 2024 and 2028, the 4 years that have already begun. The 4 years that the most careful and most honest examination of the current historical moment consistently identifies as the most consequential in the history of the human species. Not the most dramatic, not the most violent, not the most immediately legible as significant by the standards that the ordinary consumption of ordinary news tends to apply, but the most consequential in the specific sense of the period during which the decisions are being made and the trajectories are being set and the foundations are being laid for everything that will define the human condition for the next century and possibly beyond. And the specific tragedy that this recognition is pointing toward, the specific form of loss that the retrospective recognition of these 4 years will constitute for the people who lived through them without the quality of awareness and deliberate engagement that their actual importance warranted, is not the tragedy of having been in the wrong place or having made the wrong specific choices. It is the tragedy of the window. The specific tragedy of a window that is open right now, that will not be open in the same form for very much longer, and that offers, to the people who recognize it and engage with it deliberately and seriously while it is still open, something that will not be available to the people who recognize it only after it has closed. Let me be specific about what is actually happening in these 4 years, because the claim of historical consequence requires specificity rather than vague gestures toward significance, and because the specific things that are happening are genuinely and precisely different from the things that have happened in previous periods that were claimed to be uniquely consequential. The first thing that is happening is the consolidation of artificial intelligence from a promising technology into a genuinely transformative infrastructure. The specific transition we are currently in the middle of is not the transition from no AI to some AI, which happened in the previous decade and which produced changes that were significant without being foundational. It is the transition from AI as a tool that human beings use to perform specific tasks more efficiently to AI as a layer of infrastructure that mediates the relationship between human beings and virtually every significant dimension of their existence. The information environment, the labor market, the healthcare system, the educational system, the financial system, the political system, the intimate personal life, the specific texture of what it feels like to be a conscious being navigating the world in the conditions of the current moment. This transition is happening right now in these 4 years, and the specific decisions being made right now about how this infrastructure is being designed and who controls it and what values are encoded in it and what forms of human life it is organized to serve and what forms it is organized to marginalize are decisions whose consequences will be experienced by the people who make them and by the people who are subject to them for far longer than the 4 years in which the foundational decisions are being made. The governance frameworks being established or not established right now, The regulatory structures being built or not built right now, the cultural norms about the appropriate relationship between human judgment and algorithmic guidance that are crystallizing right now. The specific distribution of power between the small number of entities that are developing the most consequential AI systems and the vastly larger number of people whose lives those systems will most directly shape, a distribution that is being determined right now in conditions that make it most difficult for the vastly larger number to participate meaningfully in determining it. The second thing that is happening in these 4 years is the approaching of several ecological thresholds whose crossing will make the choices available after them fundamentally different from the choices available before them. The climate scientists who have been most carefully tracking the specific physical systems whose behavior will most directly determine the conditions of human civilization in the second half of this century are, with increasing consistency and increasing urgency, identifying the current period as the period of last genuine opportunity for the specific interventions that could meaningfully alter the trajectory of those systems before the feedbacks and the tipping points that their own behavior is approaching make the alteration genuinely impossible rather than merely difficult and expensive. This is not the generic claim that the ecological situation is serious and that something needs to be done. It is the specific and empirically grounded claim that the current 4-year window is the period in which the specific decisions with the specific consequences for the specific physical systems approaching the specific thresholds are most consequential, because the window in which the decisions can meaningfully alter the trajectory is closing in ways that are measurable and that are being measured by the people best positioned to measure them. The third thing that is happening in these 4 years is the specific crystallization of the global political order in a form that will determine the distribution of power and the architecture of cooperation or conflict between the most consequential actors in the global system for a generation. The specific contests over the governance of the most consequential technologies, the specific renegotiation of the frameworks through which the global economy distributes its benefits and its costs, the specific determination of whether the institutions designed to provide the forms of global coordination that the genuinely global challenges of the current moment require are going to be strengthened or hollowed out, these are happening right now in conditions of genuine fluidity that will not persist. Fluid conditions are conditions of possibility. They are conditions in which a wider range of outcomes are genuinely available than in conditions of established structure. And the fluid conditions of the current global political moment are a window of possibility that the crystallization of the next several years will close in ways that make the outcomes achieved in the fluid period the fixed conditions of the subsequent period. The fourth thing, and the one that is most directly consequential for the specific lives of the specific people reading or listening to this, is the specific window of personal development and personal preparation that the current period offers and that the conditions of the next period will make genuinely more difficult to take advantage of. The specific capacities, the attentional sovereignty, and the genuine human relationship, and the understanding of the systems shaping your life, and the genuine intellectual humility, and the physical and psychological resilience, and the economic adaptability, and the capacity for genuine meaning-making, and the relationship with uncertainty that we have examined in previous conversations as the most important things to develop before 2027 are capacities that are specifically and precisely more developable right now than they will be in conditions where the more sophisticated versions of the systems that are most specifically organized to prevent their development have become more fully deployed. This is the specific form of the window that these 4 years represent for the individual human being who is reading or listening to this. Not merely the window of historical significance that belongs to the period, and that will be recognized in retrospect regardless of what any individual does with it, but the specific window of individual possibility, the window during which the specific development of the specific capacities that the coming conditions will most urgently require is most specifically available, that is open right now, and that the passage of these 4 years will close in ways that make the subsequent development genuinely more difficult and genuinely more costly than the development that is available right now. I want to be honest with you about why these 4 years are specifically 4 years rather than a longer or shorter period. Because the specific claim of a 4-year window requires a genuine answer rather than the vague gestures towards significance that the claim of historical importance so often produces. The 4 years from 2024 to 2028 are the specific window because they are the specific period during which 3 simultaneous convergences are occurring that individually would be significant and that together are genuinely unprecedented. The first convergence is technological. The specific capabilities of the AI systems being developed and deployed in this period are advancing through a transition from tools to infrastructure that is not going to be reversed, and that is establishing the specific architecture of the algorithmic environment within which human life will be organized for the foreseeable future. The decisions about that architecture, about its values and its governance, and its distribution of power and its relationship to human autonomy and human flourishing are most consequentially made during the transition rather than after it. After the infrastructure is established, the decisions about its design are the province of the people who control the established infrastructure. During the transition, the range of people who can meaningfully influence those decisions is genuinely larger. The second convergence is ecological. The specific physical systems whose behavior will most directly determine the conditions of human civilization in the second half of this century are approaching the specific thresholds whose crossing will make the trajectory of those systems genuinely different in ways that cannot be reversed on any politically relevant timescale. The window in which the decisions that can meaningfully alter that trajectory are still available is not infinite. The scientists who know these systems best are identifying the current period as the period of maximum consequence for the specific decisions with the specific effects on the specific trajectories that matter most. The third convergence is political. The specific global political order that emerged from the previous century is in a period of genuine fluidity that is simultaneously dangerous and full of genuine possibility. The institutions and the frameworks and the norms that govern the most consequential interactions between the most consequential actors in the global system are being renegotiated right now, in conditions where the range of possible outcomes is genuinely wider than it will be after the renegotiation has produced the next period of relative stability. The decisions being made in this period of fluidity about the governance of the most consequential technologies and the management of the most consequential ecological systems and the distribution of the benefits and the costs of the most consequential economic transformations are decisions that will shape the fixed conditions of the subsequent period of stability in ways that the subsequent period will find very difficult to revise. Now, having said all of this, I want to address directly the response that this kind of claim about historical importance most naturally and most immediately produces in the people who hear it, because that response is itself one of the most significant obstacles to the genuine engagement with the actual situation that the actual situation most urgently requires. The response is a form of overwhelm that rapidly converts into a form of passivity. The person who is told that they are living through the most important 4 years in human history and that the decisions being made right now will shape the conditions of human civilization for a century tends to experience, as their first genuine response to actually processing that claim, a specific quality of paralysis rather than a specific quality of motivated engagement. Because the gap between the scale of what is being described and the scale of what any individual human being can meaningfully do about it is so enormous that the most natural response to genuinely feeling the gap is not the motivated engagement of a person who has identified the most important thing to invest their energy in, but the defeated passivity of a person who has correctly assessed that the investment available to them is genuinely inadequate to the scale of what is required. This response is entirely understandable. And it is, as a guide to behavior in the actual situation, deeply wrong in a way that has consequences for the actual situation that are themselves consequential. It is wrong because it is based on a misunderstanding of what genuinely consequential individual action in genuinely important historical moments actually looks like. The great turning points in human history, the moments when trajectories genuinely shifted in directions that made the subsequent world genuinely different from the world that would have resulted from the continuation of the previous trajectory, were not primarily produced by the actions of individuals who correctly identified the importance of the moment and then produced actions commensurate with the scale of that importance. They were produced by the accumulated effect of many individual actions, most of them modest in scale and most of them invisible in their individual contribution, that together produced the specific shift in conditions that made the trajectory change possible. The genuinely consequential individual action in the genuinely important historical moment is almost never the dramatic, large-scale, immediately visible action that the scale of the moment seems to demand. It is almost always something quieter and more specific and more immediately available than that. It is the person who develops the specific capacities that the coming conditions will most urgently require, not because they will thereby single-handedly change the trajectory of human civilization, but because the development of those capacities makes them a genuinely different kind of presence in every specific context they inhabit. And the accumulated effect of many people becoming genuinely different kinds of presences in the specific context they inhabit is itself one of the most reliable mechanisms through which trajectories actually change. It is the person who has the specific conversation that the specific moment most urgently requires to be had in the specific community they are part of, not because the conversation will by itself determine the trajectory of the most consequential decisions of the current period, but because the specific community's understanding of those decisions will be shaped by the specific conversations that specific people in it choose to have or to avoid. It is the person who makes the specific choice in the specific professional or political or civic context they inhabit to prioritize the long-term and the genuinely important over the short-term and the immediately rewarding. Not because this choice by itself will produce the outcome the long-term and the genuinely important require, but because the accumulation of such choices across the many specific contexts of many specific lives is the specific mechanism through which the direction of institutions and cultures and collective human projects actually changes. The genuinely consequential individual action in the genuinely important historical moment is, in other words, the action that is actually available to the individual, taken with the specific quality of genuine awareness of the moment's importance that makes the available action genuinely available rather than invisible beneath the noise of ordinary daily life. And the specific gift that the genuine awareness of the moment's importance offers is not the impossible gift of individual actions commensurate with the scale of what is happening. It is the very possible gift of ordinary available actions taken with a quality of deliberateness and a quality of genuine engagement with what the moment actually requires that the absence of awareness makes very difficult to sustain. This is the specific and practical importance of understanding that humanity's